Released on October 1st of 2001, the 350-card set Odyssey came out and launched the first truly new storyline in Magic the Gathering since, technically, the Mirage block, as it takes place in a completely new part of Dominaria and, storyline-wise, more than a century after the events of Apocalypse that concluded the block's long Weatherlight saga. With the new set and storyline came new tribes, card concepts, characters, locations, and more. Gone are the trials and tribulations of Gerard, Urza, and the like.
And now for something completely different.
Magic players get introduced to the likes of the barbaric pit fighter Kamahl, a mysterious artifact called the Mirrari, and the sinister and occult-like Cabal. The entire story can be experienced by reading the Odyssey novel by Vance Moore. For the time being, here's a quick summary.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
On the far side of Dominaria, far from most of the rest of the plane's landmasses, lay Otaria, a small island continent that survived the Phyrexian invasion 100 years before relatively unscathed. It's home to a variety of species and tribes like mountain-dwelling dwarves and barbarians, centaurs, anthropomorphic avians, merfolk, and the like. A barbarian named Kamahl, having found no more adventures or challenges left in his native Pardic Mountains, ventures to Cabal City with dreams of becoming a champion pit fighter in an upcoming event where the grand prize is an odd chrome sphere of sorts that seems to have some sort of unnatural allure to it, and is said to be able to fulfill the wishes of its beholder. Once there, he registers for the tournament and meets a streetwise youth and member of the Cabal known as Chainer, a huge centaur named Seaton, who has come to the city to win protection for his forest home, as well as others, such as Lieutenant Kurtar, a representative of an anti-Cabal group known as the Order, and Turg, a slave under the control of a merfolk known as Ambassador Liquidus, who has his own plans for the event's grand prize. During the presentation of the fighters at the tournament's onset, the 3-day event's various prizes were shown: gold, weapons, armor, and the sphere, an artifact called Mirari. Upon gazing at the sphere, Kamahl was infatuated and was determined to do anything necessary to obtain it. Kamahl excelled at the tournament in the Cabal fighting pit and quickly became a crowd favorite. During one of the later rounds of the tournament, however, the event gets interrupted by a dragon attack. All of the pit fighters, along with some of his secret army under the command of Ambassador Liquidus, help to defend the arena against it, and Kamahl lands the killing blow. Unfortunately for the barbarian, he found himself crushed under the body of the fallen draconic foe, and the Cabal ultimately claims that Kurtar, an avian soldier fighting for the Order, is the ultimate victor. The Birdman is allowed to take any prize he wants from the Cabal's vaults, and, of course, Kurtar chooses the Mirari. In the artifact, he is able to see great visions of battlefield valor. He then departs for the Order's headquarters to present the sphere to Piana, the Order's leader. Kamahl, Seaton, and Liquidus all eventually follow, the allure of the mysterious orb too strong to resist. Liquidus, with assistance from a brainwashed member of the Order, catches up to Lieutenant Kurtar before the other two can, and is able to infiltrate the encampment. There, Kurtar presents the artifact to Piana. The Order, however, distrusts artifacts, fearing that they could bring upon destruction of the world. Piana confiscates the Mirari, which causes Kurtar to plan a coup to regain control of the artifact. Meanwhile, nearby, Liquidus is forming his own scheme to gain ownership of it. Shortly thereafter, Kamahl, having departed from Seaton so that the centaur can recover in his forest home from injuries sustained in the tournament, reaches the Order Citadel. It's then that several plots fire off all at once. Kamahl attempts to rob the Order of their newfound prize, but fails to steal the artifact in part due to Kurtar's own plans hatching. The avian lieutenant had gotten to the Mirari first, and used it to cast a spell that froze much of the fortress, ironically killing both Captain Piana and Lieutenant Kurtar. Kamahl managed to avoid being caught in the spell's blast, and resumed his search for the artifact, but it was already in the hands of another, the merman Liquidus. The ambassador sends the artifact to the underwater Myrrh Empire, while he holds the barbarian at bay. Kamahl is ultimately able to escape Liquidus, but finds himself unable to reach the Undersea Empire, and, thus, unable to claim the Mirari as his own. He returns to Cabal City empty-handed and continues to fight in the Cabal's pits, but no prize won had much value to him, as all he yearned for now was possession of the artifact that had thus far eluded his grasp. Eventually, the barbarian settles in a coastal town not far from the Mirari's new underwater home to bide his time. Meanwhile, in the Myrrh Empire, Abastor Loquatus returns home, though with plans to off the Myrrh Emperor, Abishan, and claim the realm for himself. Ever good at mind games, Loquatus plays into the Emperor's insecurities, creating an aura of uncertainty and doubt around the Emperor as Lawan, the Empire's estranged Empress, has begun challenging Abishan's rule. All the while, Loquatus searches the Imperial treasury for the orb with the help of a Kamal Dembentist he had met during his time in Cabal City. Over time, the Cephalid Empire begins to succumb to the Mirari's call, and greatly has the desire to touch the artifact. As he does so, he sees visions of a vast, infinite ocean void of any sort of landmass. Unfortunately, like Kurtar before him, Emperor Abishan is unable to control the Mirari's power, and the artifact goes haywire, only this time worse than before. The resulting wake causes a third of Ateria to fall into the sea and destroys the Myrrh Empire's capital before Loquatus and the Kamal Dementis, Fula, who's better known as Braids due to her hairstyle, manage to intervene. Like with Lieutenant Kurtar previously, the Emperor did not survive. The Myrrh Empire now in ruins, and Loquatus's plans now changed, he and the Cabalists venture back to Cabal City with the Mirari in tow. Kamal, independent of the other two, also sets off for the city, feeling the Mirari's call yet again. As for what happens next, we'll have to leave you in torment until the next Magic History video, as this is where the story of Odyssey as a set ends. Of course, there's always the story behind the story. As a set, Odyssey was well received. It's considered to be mid-range in terms of power level, as it's incomparable to both those sets found in the Urza's block, arguably the highest power level ever in Magic, and that of the Masks block, which consists of some of the weakest sets printed up to that point. The set had a very prominent graveyard theme, which had its own mixed reactions from players. While Odyssey's graveyard theme was one of the best executed such themes of the time, players often felt like they were more or less forced to play Magic with graveyards in mind. That theme was even more in the forefront thanks to a little gravestone symbol next to the name of every card that had their new flashback ability, which allows players to cast the card from their graveyard. It's an ability that showed up only on instants and sorceries, and would ultimately prove quite popular among Magic players. It would make its return not just in the remaining two Odyssey block sets, Torment and Judgment, but also in the Time Spiral and Innistrad blocks, as well as Modern Horizons and Commander 2019. In fact, Wizards of the Coast designer Mark Rosewater calls Flashback the best mechanic he's ever designed, despite early misgivings.
There was some debate at the time. I remember having some debates about, is this exciting? Because once we figured out the cost we had to put it at, the second cost looked pretty big. And so the concern we had at the time was, is this going to be a problem? Is this going to look exciting to people?
But Flashback was not the only mechanic in Odyssey that fit the set's graveyard theme. Threshold, the brainchild of Magic the Gathering originator Richard Garfield, is also prominent within the set.
Richard was very interested in the idea of cards that had an A-B state, meaning they were in an A state and they swifted to a B state based upon a threshold, some criteria that you had to meet.
The mechanic grants players a bonus of some sort if and when the card's controller has 7 or more cards in their graveyard, though at first that was not going to be the case.
Originally, the threshold would have a number, and if you had that many cards in your graveyard, then it turned on. So for example, you might have threshold 4 and threshold 6 and threshold 7. So the problem was when you played that, it was mind-melting.
And in addition to the graveyard theme, Odyssey had a token creature sub-theme with a number of token creature generating cards. In fact, several token cards were even offered as prizes in the now defunct Magic Player Rewards program. Odyssey also boasted a nice variety of cycles, 15 of them to be exact. Most notable of these are Bursts, which are common instant or sorcery spells that scale up by having copies in the graveyard, Rites, which scale up depending on the number of cards its caster discards upon cast, Eggs, which are one-time mana filters that include a bonus card draw, Filter Lands, which, for 1 and tap, will produce 1 mana each of any 2 allied mana combination. Lugoifs, the first 5 in a creature type since the original namesake creature was introduced in Ice Age, with each's power and toughness being determined by the number of cards of a particular type in all graveyards. And Atogs, the first multicolored Atogs to be printed in the game. These allied colored creatures have activated abilities that, well, eat a specific resource in order to grow larger. There's also the 5-colored Atog, which eats other Atogs. Atog, by the way, is an anagram of the word goat. There were also a few vertical cycles, such as the common, uncommon, rare cycle that creates creature tokens, Chatter of the Squirrel, Roar of the Worm, and Call of the Herd. Odyssey also had a cycle of shrines, which are rare enchantments that have their own specific triggered ability. Unlike the shrine cards that would later be printed in the Kamigawa block and in Core Set 2021, Odyssey's shrines don't actually count as shrines, despite the word literally being in the name.
It says it right there on the box.
Now, as mentioned earlier, the entire Odyssey block takes place on the island continent of Otaria, far removed from much of the rest of the major areas in Dominaria, where most of the game's other sets, many of which were part of the iconic Weatherlight Saga story arc, have taken place thus far. To further separate the block from Weatherlight Saga relations, many common creature types from previous sets, such as elves and goblins, were replaced with new or unusual types such as barbarians, centaurs, cephalids, and insects. In fact, the contemporary creature types antelope, cephalid, and squirrel were all introduced to Black Border Magic in Odyssey. Interestingly enough, the next block, the Onslaught block, will bring back a lot of these more traditional Magic the Gathering creature types despite being on the same continent as the Odyssey block, but we'll get to that tidbit in a future video.
Of course you will.
Getting back to the cards themselves, Odyssey has a handful worth mentioning, despite Star City Games writer Abe Sargent saying that out of the set's 250 cards, only 4 of them are any good. Those 4, by the way, are Wild Mongrel, Upheaval, Roar the Worm, and Psychotog. And that last card, Psychotog, is the one that made the largest impact. Beyond that, more than 35% of respondents in an online poll conducted on MagicTheGathering.com in 2002 saying that they believe the printing of the card was a mistake. The Uncommon was well represented at the 2002 World Championship with 6 of the top 8 decks using Psychotog-based strategies. This includes a 2002 World Championship winner, Carlos Romeo. The Brazilian's blue-black Psychotog deck focused on well-timed counter magic paired with the Psychotog Upheaval combo. Not only was the win big for Romeo, it was big for all of South America as he became the first Magic the Gathering player from the continent to be crowned world champion.
After the finals, I didn't realize what I have accomplished. It took me some time to realize how big my accomplishment was. I went to sleep, I didn't realize, I woke up, go take a shower, and during the shower I can remember exactly like, what? Like I am the Magic World Champion. Like this is like great thing.
But the set's good and noteworthy cards go beyond that small selection highlighted by Sargent, due in part to the eventual rise in popularity of the casual Elder Dragon Highlander format, also simply known as Commander. While the cards Braids, Cabal Minion, and Entomb eventually found their place on the tournament scene, more casual-oriented cards such as Bearscape, Patron Wizard, Tarnished Citadel, Deserted Temple, Time Stretch, Traumatize, Legacy Dredge staple Cephalid Coliseum, Legacy Burn staple Barbarian Ring, the flashback direct damage spell Firebolt, and Diabolic Tutor, a strictly worse version of the OG Magic card Demonic Tutor, are all worth mentioning. But there are also cards worth mentioning for other reasons. A number of Cephalid Looter cards left the factory misprinted with the creature type Cephalid Wizard rather than simply Cephalid. Since then, the card's creature type has been updated to Cephalid Rogue as part of Wizards of the Coast's Grand Creature Type update of 2007. There's also the card Bashed to Bits. It features artwork by Matt Cavada, despite the card's art credit giving a shout out to Gary Riddell. Odyssey also has the once popular card Shadow Mage Infiltrator. While the creature saw some play thanks to it being a draw engine with evasion, the real story is the artwork. If the person in Rick Farrell's illustration looks familiar, that's because it's based on John Finkel, winner of the 2000-2001 Magic the Gathering Invitational Tournament. Oh, and there's one other card. It's the set's pre-release card, Stone Tongue Basilisk. Like with the Invasion block before it, which featured pre-release promotional cards that were printed in a language that was otherwise unseen in the game of Magic the Gathering, Odyssey's pre-release card was printed in Arabic.
It's a great language.
And finally, the artwork on the card Repentant Vampire is a reference to Angel, a character from the then popular television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, as well as his own spin-off show. In fact, when combined with the white uncommon card Gallantry, the two cards form a single scene of Buffy and Angel fighting against the undead. You're welcome.
Funny.
Is Odyssey one of your favorite Magic the Gathering sets? If so, let us know in the comments section below. And be sure to subscribe to Magic Untapped on YouTube, and please support our efforts on Patreon for more great Magic the Gathering content.